Half-Life 2 is the best game ever made, in my opinion. It blends amazing gameplay with an incredibly atmospheric and immersive setting with some of the best presented story I've ever experienced in a video game. It rarely restricts the player and almost always allows them freedom to walk around and explore environments. I can't talk about this game without talking about its incredibly interesting and very troubled development. Half-Life 1 came out in 1998 and it was critically acclaimed. It revolutionised the gaming industry, and without it, games wouldn't be the same as they are today. It showed consumers that the first-person shooter genre isn't just restricted to just shooting things, but they're able to tell their stories through environments instead of shitty CGI cutscenes and just not having any story at all. But we aren't here for Half-Life 1, we are here for the second game in the series, Opposing Force. Wait, no, that's wrong, hold on. The next game in the series, Blue Ship... What the fuck is going on? Oh, Jesus. Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 started development in 1999, right after the release of the first game. It went through a hell of a development journey in between its beginning in 1999 and its release in 2004. A lot happened, therefore the game changed dramatically. I, like many others, am incredibly intrigued by this development process and regularly scrounge around on the internet to find any more details about these long-lost development versions of my favourite game. Well, they would be lost, but... In 2003, a little German man by the name of Axel Gembe hacked into the Valve servers and stole, ready for this, the entire fucking source code of Half-Life 2. This included every map, model, and climate texture ever made for the game. I don't know what it is with like these highly anticipated games getting leaked, but it seems to happen to all of them. GTA 6, the Insomniac leak, even Half-Life 1 got leaked. I mean, this was like the worst out of all of them. Not only was this everything made by Valve for Half-Life 2 getting leaked, but it also showed that Valve was way behind on their beating quota. I mean, well, they said they were in development. They expected to release the game in 2003, but I mean, look at this shit. Now this was the worst thing that could happen for Valve at the moment, because they were getting bled dry of money by the ongoing lawsuit from their former publisher Sierra, but I want to explore the beta in more depth in another video because shit's genuinely interesting. The game opens up with a close-up of a human eye, or at least something pretending to be human. The scene seemingly takes place after the events of Half-Life 1, however this couldn't be further from the truth. Gordon wakes up on a train, a callback to the opening of the first game. As soon as the player steps off, they know instantly this is a departure from the first game. This is one of few, in quotes, traditional cutscenes in the entire franchise where the player is well and truly frozen in place and unable to move. These are used sparingly, similarly to other traditional aspects used regularly in most games, but in this game they're used rarely, like music to a lesser extent, but we'll talk about that later. The player sees a man talking on a massive screen, obviously some sort of powerful figure, and then they make their way out of the train station. As Gordon walks around, he notices civilians wearing the same blue overalls over and over and over again, and he also notices a strange force of some kind, obviously in a more powerful position than the rest of the people walking around. This is the Combine, more specifically in this part of the game, Civil Protection or Metro Cops, who are the only human enemies you'll encounter. Throughout Half-Life 2, you really only interact with the Combine transhuman forces, soldiers and elites, and the synths, dropships, gunships, striders, etc. The actual Combine species is hidden from you until the episodes, and even then you don't interact with them, or at least not outside of scripted encounters, but the episodes I'll save for another video again. Gordon walks into a fenced area of some kind. It looks as if it's the way out, but before he can reach the exit, he's blocked by a Metro Cop. Eventually he gets led into the room by another Metro Cop. All hope is lost until... oh my goodness. Gordon makes his way out of the room, blah blah blah, and then he exits into a new world, familiar yet different. Something about the reveal of City 17 is just really well done. The massive monolithic citadel in the distance is so imposing in this opening section. The music. Oh, the music. Music in Half-Life 2 is similar to cutscenes, it's rarely used, but when it is used, damn, it's so good. Now obviously music is not used to the extent of cutscenes. There are really only 2 cutscenes that I can think of off of the top of my head in this game, but most games will play music through pretty much every moment. Every battle encounter has a soundtrack, every dialogue moment. There's always a prescient backing track, but no, not in Half-Life 2. I can't comment on Half-Life 1, I've played it but not completed it, and it has been a while since I last touched that game. But Half-Life 2 uses music sparsely, and when it is used, God, is it good. It's always such an impactful moment when the music kicks in game, and it makes specific moments have so much more weight behind them than they would if music was used all throughout the game. But that's enough about music, let's go back to the game. Gordon walks through the streets of the city and sees some pretty fucked up shit. Metro cops beating civilians, general depression and abandoned playgrounds, which I would punt that doll into the stratosphere if I had the chance in real life, but all this leads to Gordon into an apartment complex, and he notices Metro cops in the halls seemingly watching him, and eventually a chase begins. This chase ends in Gordon's little weak ass getting beat and being saved by Alex Vance, who's daughter of Eli Vance, a man who Gordon knew in Black Mesa, and a man who's seemingly obsessed with trying to get Alex and Gordon to fuck. Like, I really don't know what this bit is, but it continues through Half-Life 2 in its episodes. You have Eli wanting Alex and Gordon to get it on, Kleiner asked the rebels to fuck in episode 1. I really don't know what this is, why this is a continuous thing, but whatever. Too bad we don't get to see Alex's fully well, there is this scene with Kleiner, Alex, Lamar, Barney, with an appearance from Mossman and Eli, but nothing really else happens to note here, other than the fact this is where you get the HEV suit and the crowbar, and you get a glimpse of the G-Man and an advisor. And there's also a cut monster who makes a small appearance here, but nowhere else in the game. But I feel like this is a constant thing throughout this game. For the first 1, maybe 2 playthroughs, these moments might be okay, maybe even enjoyable. But for someone who regularly replays this game, fuck me, do they drag. Like, there's a lot of interactability in these areas, but I mean, the only 2 that I can really think of are quite annoying, but they are their own chapters, so they are technically skippable. But they are better than a 6-hour modern AAA cutscene. I love you, Kojima, by the way. But after this scene is over, you get outside, and you get given the crowbar by my love, I mean Barney, and you proceed through the canals. This chapter isn't really notable. It introduces you to the combat of Half-Life 2, which is very simple but very satisfying, and it has aged incredibly well. It's very fun, and it's overall just a very good combat system, but as I said, root canal isn't that interesting for many players who constantly replay this game. We do have a few new enemies that get introduced in this chapter. The Barnacle, which isn't really a threat unless you're just like stupid or not really paying attention. The Hunter Chopper, who is a constant threat in this first part of the game, but is actually revealed to be a massive crime-baby pussy. And the Manhacks, who are incredibly annoying, and the less said about those little fuckers, the better. But let's move on to the U-boat section. Headcrabs and zombies are the only enemies that seem to pop up in every single Half-Life game, reintroduced in Half-Life 2, though the relevation that the Combine uses them as a bioweapon is actually really good. This concept is often used throughout the game and its episodes, and it's actually quite a horrific way to weaponize something. It's not the way that they are actually weaponized, they're just sort of put in a pod and shot out into a random location, but it's how that they affect what they're used on It's actually canon that the head crabs keep their victims alive and suffering. Those moans you hear in the game aren't just gibberish, they're genuine human screams, just reversed. That isn't exactly a nice way to go at. Well, enough about the head crabs, let's talk the Urbo section. This, for some reason, is kind of disliked in the Half-Life community. I do quite like it. The driving, well, yes, it is clunky, it's actually quite satisfying. And this section introduces you to the absolute beast of a weapon, a revolver. This thing is absolutely ridiculous, and it is so damn satisfying to use. It one-shots every humanoid enemy with a headshot, and one-shots every Metrocop. Who you will be using this against for the next, like, half an hour. Eventually, you make your way to this pretty open area. This is the chopper boss fight. This is a fairly fun fight. It's not really difficult, but there is definitely something fun in here. After completing this, there's a bit of a puzzle, and then you're free to carry on downstream to Black Mesa East. I don't know if I mentioned this, but Black Mesa is the research facility where the first game was set, and everything went to shit after they opened an interdimensional portal to a world called Zen. This is where all the head crabs and vortigons come from, and I'm assuming the antlions too, but they aren't in the first game. And there were a lot more Zen creatures in the first game. There were hound eyes, bull squids, the gonarch, the testicle crab, the nylant, the controller, the grunt, the ichthyosaur, who I said earlier makes a brief appearance in this game, the gargantua and snarks, who actually appear in Half-Life Alyx. But no, nothing about that. Let's talk about Black Mesa East. This is another Kleiner's lab situation, except this time it is a lot more interesting. This is the first time you meet Mossman and Eli in person, and you also get to see a bit of beef between Mossman and Alex. I just have to say, I don't know if this was actually like a scripted moment in the game, or if it's just something that happened in my playthrough. But Alex side-eyeing Mossman is hilarious. But there is something that this chapter of the game introduces that is so amazing and important and downright blessing. Dog. I love dogs so much, but what I was supposed to say was the gravity gun, the best weapon in video game history. This was Valve flexing their new source engine and physics tech even more, and goddamn did they do it well. This gun is similar to that one weapon from the Fallout games, but it allows you to use everything as ammo, except this is better because, you know, fuck you. Now I will carry on talking about the gravity gun, but in this next section, which doesn't really need an introduction. Ravenholm might just be the greatest chapter in the entire game, and is one of the only chapters that made it through almost all of Half-Life 2's development cycle, which is part of the reason it was so good. Just something about that beta that I love, but I don't want to get into a tangent again. Let's just talk about Ravenholm. Ravenholm was Valve showing everyone how to make a game. They gave the player the gravity gun and then gave them an entire sandbox for half an hour or so to play around with. This chapter introduces the player to so many mechanics, it's insane. Throwing swords at zombies is so damn satisfying, and the shotgun is so addictive to use because of how satisfying it is. But not only is Ravenholm home to a load of fun mechanics and an incredibly fun sandbox, but it's also so damn atmospheric and different to the rest of the game. It also introduces you to a one-time character called Father Grigori. Father Grigori is thought to be one of the only survivors of Ravenholm. I say thought because Ravenholm was supposed to have an entire spin-off game that was being made by Arcane. Yes, that Arcane, the guys behind Dishonored and Prey. And I have a feeling that if it came out, there would have been at least a few other survivors to interact with. I wish we got this game, because it would have been a really amazing game, and it's obvious that Arcane was impacted by this partnership with Valve. Dishonored's environment designer is the same guy who made Half-Life 2's environments, and as soon as you hear that, you can instantly tell it's very similar. Both environments are very similar. They both take place in a European setting and with strange industrial structures littering the street. And Prey is just a very similar playing game to the Half-Life games. Again, I don't want to get into too much detail about this, as I think I'd really like to do something about cut Valve things. It's really interesting to look into. But that's enough about Arcane, let's talk more about Ravenholm. Father Gregory is one of the most beloved characters in the Half-Life franchise because he blurs the line between badass, philosophical, and complete, utter insanity. He is one of the most quotable characters in the entire franchise, just only overtaken by the G-Man, and is the only bit of comfort you'd get in this chapter. Ravenholm also introduces 4 new enemy types and 3 new fear types. The fast and poison headcrabs, the fast and poison zombies. The fast headcrabs are probably the least threatening creatures. They're just headcrabs, but, you know, fast. But the other 3, oh dear me. The poison headcrabs drain you down to 1 health, but as far as I know they can't kill you. The issue is, they are incredibly annoying. Valve uses these damn things everywhere. I don't know why, but you know, they get used behind every single corner past this point in the game. But the other 2 are just downright terrifying. The poison zombie is a goddamn beast. It tanks everything for some reason and has the throwing capabilities of an NFL player. I mean, they can hit you from across the map with a single poison headcrab. It is insane. And the fast zombie, oh, the fast zombie. These things are eventually, for a true alpha male like myself, just an annoyance. But the first time someone encounters these things in the game, they just unlock a fear for life. The howling that you hear all throughout Ravenholm is terrifying, and when you see the silhouettes of these things in the distance running across the rooftops and screaming, Jesus Christ, and then you see it running towards you from across the street. Luckily, not too long after the introduction of this place, you get a shotgun, which is probably the best weapon against these things, but the rooftop sections where they're climbing up to you, they are still fucking terrifying to this day. Eventually you make your way across to Father Gregory and meet face to face for the first time. The 2 of you make your way across the graveyard and fight zombies together. This section is so badass. Gregory shouting at the zombies and shooting at them as you throw massive swords at them is amazing, and then you reach the end. You walk through an open gate and it shuts behind you as Gregory explains he has to stay behind. He carries on his fight as he walks into the fire, cackling maniacally. We assume he has to have survived, as the story of Ravenholm was, once again, unfinished and supposed to be carried on through the eyes of Adrian Shepard from Half-Life Opposing Force, in the Ravenholm game being developed by Arcane. But we move on to the next section of the game. You might notice now that I'm talking about these chapters separately. This is because they start to become longer and more separated from each other, and so instead of being like sort of linking into each other. Highway 17 is definitely one of my favourite chapters, probably just behind Ravenholm, as this chapter does something similar to Ravenholm. It has a phenomenal atmosphere. The feeling of loneliness and isolation this chapter makes you feel is unmatched, and it probably has my favourite section in Half-Life 2, the bridge. No, not that bridge. A bridge is one of those special moments that is heightened by the music, as I mentioned before. Lab Practicum is probably my favourite track in the entire game because this scene just makes the player feel alone. It really does show the difference between the high action and high stakes of the first game and the loneliness and more somber nature of this game. Although Gordon never talks and we never really see him on his own journey, we know what he's feeling. The development of his character isn't done through speech or actions, it's reflected in the world and levels of this game. Taking environmental storytelling literally, this part of the game is about a protagonist left to reflect on what he's done and what has happened. And this is really the moment that shows how well the story of this game is handled. And speaking of storytelling, Highway 17 is chock full of it. As you drive along the winding roads that seem to go on forever, you'll occasionally pass something like a house or a collection of buildings or something like that. Most of these are actually missable, But if you take the time to go in and search them and look around, you'll see it's more than just supplies that you'll find in there. You might go out back and see 2 tombstones on the edge of a cliff, or maybe a head crab shell just jutting out the house, alerting you that the house might have a few unsavoury characters inside, or even a pile of charred corpses with soldiers patrolling the premises, implying that those soldiers were trying to destroy some evidence. There's really no lack of storytelling and little details in this chapter, and it's really well done. None of it is done through a pre-generated cutscene, none of it through dialogue, it's all done through the environment and the atmosphere. And that's something that games nowadays should really try and replicate. I'm not saying that modern day games have bad stories, no. Red Dead Redemption 2, for example, has one of the best stories in all of media, but Half-Life 2's presentation of that story is so well done and is very rarely, if ever, done nowadays. Now, like with Ravenholm, Highway 17 introduces numerous new mechanics and enemies to the game. The first one you'll encounter is the Combine Snipers. These guys aren't really seen again until after Highway 17, but they are definitely a fun mechanic. Dodging behind cover and watching physics objects tumble and fall as the snipers try to shoot at Gordon, it's incredibly fun. But the other 2 enemies you get introduced to in this portion of the game are the Combine Soldier and the Shotgun Soldier. What? The Combine Soldier is similar to a Metro Cop in how they behave, but instead of pistols and SMGs, these guys sport the AR-2 and SMGs again. The AR-2 is an incredibly satisfying and powerful gun to use, and it's better than the SMG in almost every way. The only real reason to use an SMG after getting this beast of a gun is its fairly powerful alt-fire, the grenade launcher. But the Shotgun Soldier is, you guessed it, a Combine Soldier with a shotgun. These guys seem to behave a bit differently to a normal soldier, but they seem to try and get in close to you and aren't as aggressive as a normal soldier. Now you're going to be fighting these guys for the rest of the game. Even at the end where the elites are introduced, these guys seemingly still show up the most. There are also the gunships that get introduced in this chapter. We don't talk about the gunships, but you eventually make your way to a rebel base and Triage at Dawn begins to play. A legendary song that is always associated with Half-Life and is basically its main theme now. We learn from Alex that Eli and Mossman were kidnapped after Black Mesa East was raided by the Combine, which is the reason you end up at Ravenholm. They were taken to Nova Prospekt, which is something I'll touch on later, as that is once again another notable chapter. You make your way outside and you find yourself with the buggy, and it's another vehicle, which is kind of divisive, but I do kind of like it. It's satisfying to use, but it is a bit of a pain and a bit buggy. Get it? Because, sorry. But you also get given the Tau Cannon, which was a weapon that was in Half-Life 1, but only appears on the buggy in this game, as it was cut from being an actual separate weapon. This is also the part where you come across the antlions, and these guys are built up to be a threat, but they aren't really that threatening. If anything, they're more of a nuisance, to be honest. But then there's sand traps. Sand traps is its own chapter, but it's not big enough for me to give it its own section of the video, but it follows on from Highway 17 and is basically the floor is lava as a chapter. You place physics objects down so that you don't touch the floor and all the antlines. The only issue is that there can only really be like 4 antlines at once in this level, and again, antlines aren't really threatening. But there is the end boss fight, and this is the antline guard. This guy isn't that hard, and it is like a fun boss fight again, but in episode 2, well, the antline guard is a bit more menacing, but we'll leave that for an episode 2 video. And on that note, that leads us on to Nova Prospekt is like my 3rd favourite chapter of this game, and again, because of its atmosphere. The soundtrack is incredibly well done, but this is also where you get introduced to the pheromones. These things allow you to control the antlines and makes me feel like I'm sieging the beaches on D-Day. Commanding the antlines can be annoying, but it also makes me feel powerful. We get introduced to the turrets in this chapter, and prison guards and prison shotgunners, but they are literally just reskins of the other Combine soldiers. Nova Prospekt's design is really good, and I wish we could have seen more, but I doubt we are going to because it gets blown up at the end. This section of the game is technically 2 chapters, Nova Prospekt and Entanglement, which I think is just like a continuation of Nova Prospekt. But the difference is, in Nova Prospekt you have the ability to control the antlines, and in Entanglement you have to do these annoying turret defense sections. I mean, I seriously hate these parts of the game. They are so annoying. But eventually you catch up with Alex at the train depot, which I think was supposed to be like its own chapter in the beta, but it was literally like one section of a level in this the final game. Alex finds Eli and reassures him everything is going to be okay, and after one annoying turret defense section, she catches up to you and intersects a broadcast of Mossman and Breen talking to each other, eventually figuring out that Mossman was an agent for the Combine. Obviously she's in shock, but she tells Gordon to go ahead without her for some reason. I know she was shocked, but this is like actual bullshit. I don't want to go and do another one of those fucking turret sections. But eventually she catches up again, and they come across Mossman, and they take Eli and Mossman into the teleport room. Mossman takes off with Eli in the teleport to what we learn later is actually the Citadel. But anyway, after yet another turret defense section, Alex and Gordon get in the teleport together and leave as the teleport blows up, causing them to travel forward in time a week and find out that a rebellion has started. We get another section in Kleiner's lab and see Barney on the screen, thank God. We also meet Dog again, thank God, who escorts us onto the streets of war-torn City 17. Now this place is obviously looking a little worse for wear. You hear gunshots ringing out in the distance, it's just overall a mess. You eventually part ways with Dog after fighting a few soldiers that pop out a store, and he throws a truck at them and then he flies off on a gunship. Then you sort of make your way through a few apartments and find yourself in a familiar place. Walking through the war-torn streets of the opening is actually kind of unsettling. It feels uncanny. It's like this weird mix of something that was once peaceful and is now full of rubble and fighting. It's really quite weird. This is where you meet up with a group of rebels and learn this is a part of the game's mechanic. Squads. Fuck rebel squads. They always get in the way or step on a hopper mine and kill themselves. I actually despise the squad mechanic. But that aside, you do get introduced to hopper mines and claw scanners. Hopper mines you can sort of like rewire so that they blow up near enemies, and claw scanners are just city scanners that can pick things up and drop suit power when you kill them. Other than that, it is just more of the same enemies, more of the same soldiers, with these new elite variants which you see at the end of Entanglement. They're more tanky and can alt-fire the AR2, more the same head crabs and head crab types. We get introduced to Striders, who are probably the most terrifying and stress-inducing creatures in any Half-Life game. When they turn up, you know you are in for an experience, but eventually you fight your way through the streets and partially destroyed apartments and meet up with Alex once again. You fight for this generator thing, which took me way too long in my YouTube playthrough, and you make your way through to the other side of the wall which the generator was closing. Alex climbs up a totally flat wall like Spider-Man and gets knocked out by soldiers and kidnapped. Gordon runs into the underground sewers, and after a kind of weird and rushed looking map, we make our way to the surface and meet up with my love, I mean Barney, again. After avoiding some snipers, that is, we eventually make our way to a museum-looking place where Gordon basically, well, eventually disables a mortar and leaves to fight some more Combine Striders until eventually ending up with Barney and Dog again. One detail I didn't really notice until my YouTube playthrough was that Barney looks sort of traumatized in compared to the beginning. I don't know if this is just me or that's like an actual detail, but I'm gonna believe it is an actual detail. Barney drops the only F-bomb in the franchise and it's supposed to be censored, but you can still hear it. And then you head into the Citadel is yet another part of the game that feels very beta-like, obviously making its way through pretty much all throughout the development of the game. You take a ride on a transport pod of some kind, eventually ending up in a room that confiscates all of your weapons and destroys them. That is apart from the gravity gun, which, well, let's have a look, shall we? You make your way through the Citadel, destroying everything that looks Combine related, and you ascend to the top to meet Wallace Breen himself. Mossman is also there, and I would say fuck Mossman, but her character is actually quite an interesting one. She seems to have a lot of moral conflicts until she eventually decides to turn against Breen at the end. Alex and Gordon chase after Breen, and Gordon descends on a lift into the final fight of the entire game after saying goodbye to Alex. And goddamn does the music go hard here. Gordon fights his way up to the top of the Citadel, killing Combine and throwing energy balls at them, vaporizing them and turning them into dust. Breen shouting at him, trying to discourage him from trying to stop him, and eventually Gordon makes his way to the top and starts the teleport. Alex runs up to Gordon and celebrates before asking if they still have
time, Dr. Freeman? Is it really that time again? It seems as if you only just arrived. You've done a great deal in a small time span. You've done so well, in fact, that I've received some interesting offers for your services. Ordinarily, I wouldn't contemplate them, but these are extraordinary times. Rather than offer you the illusion of free choice, I will take the liberty of choosing for you, if and when your time comes round again. I do apologize for what must seem to you an arbitrary imposition, Dr. Freeman. I trust it will all make sense to you in the course of... well, I'm really not at liberty to say. In the meantime, this is where I get off.
Every time I see this scene, I get chills. There's something about how this scene starts is so damn clean, and the background ambience of this whole scene is unsettling, to say the very least. It's pretty much silence, apart from the low groaning noise that sort of accompanies you throughout the entire Citadel, and in this section it's amplified because of the complete silence. It slowly becomes more audible until the door closes and Gordon's placed back into stasis. Hello, this is the end now. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and this is definitely a very different video for me, and I would appreciate if you could maybe like if you did enjoy it, and possibly, you know, just possibly subscribe for me. I do want to do more things like this in the future if it's not too much of a pain to do, and I'd really like to hear some feedback maybe in the comments, but that's all from me. I'll see you all eventually, maybe, I don't know.